Number 11. Stephanie Melgoza. College senior Stephanie Melgoza's blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit when she crashed her Dodge Dart into a couple outside an East Peoria, Illinois bar in April 2022. A police report describes how emergency responders arrived to find a severed leg protruding from the grille of Melgoza's car. They did their best to try saving 55-year-old Paul Proant and 43-year-old Andrea Rosowich, but tragically both died from their injuries. It was bizarre that Melgoza showed no emotion as she watched the scene unfold. But the situation got even more disturbing when she told officers that she had been drinking and was just getting her night started when the accident occurred. There was an open bottle of vodka on the floor of her car, suggesting that she not only got behind the wheel drunk, but that she may have continued drinking while driving. The young woman didn't seem to grasp the seriousness of what had just happened. She was more concerned about being able to attend her college graduation in 4 weeks and making it to her class the next day than she was about the fact that she had just killed 2 people. In police body cam footage captured at the scene, she could even be seen grinning and giggling during a field sobriety test before she was taken to the hospital for a DUI kit. Video captured by Officer Jeffrey Bieber, who accompanied Melgoza to the emergency room, showed her singing, dancing, and repeatedly mentioning that she had school the next day. In an obviously frustrated tone, Bieber reminded her that she killed 2 people and was going to jail. She then asked if she could attend class later in the week. There was clearly some sort of disconnect between what was going on in Melgoza's mind and the reality of the situation. Even after Bieber asked her directly if she understood that she killed 2 people, she said, "Yes, I'm just wondering when I can go to school." Bieber called Melgoza's behavior sad and pathetic and horrible, and she replied, "Can you say that as a cop?" He answered, "Yes, ma'am, I can." Either way, the officer's words fell on deaf ears as Melgoza took her egregiousness even further. She said she planned to visit Las Vegas for her birthday and that she was going to start the trip with 2 big Long Island iced teas. And she talked about how she couldn't wait to join the DUI club at her workplace. She even asked for her phone so she could text her co-workers and let them know that she was no longer the only crew member who had never gotten a DUI. Melgoza finally showed remorse after pleading guilty to 2 counts each of aggravated DUI and aggravated reckless driving. At her sentencing, she apologized for her actions and said that she never planned to drink alcohol again. She received a 14-year prison sentence, which she'll have to serve 85% of before becoming eligible for parole. In the weeks following the conclusion of the case, Melgoza's parents became the target of online trolls who were outraged by the young woman's behavior in the videos from after the crash. Her father, Patrick O'Brien, wrote in a social media post that he and Melgoza's mother can't be sorry enough for what their daughter did. But he said that the rest of the family didn't do anything wrong and therefore shouldn't have to pay for Melgoza's crimes, and he called for an end to the harassment. Number 10. Dante Wright. In a horrifying display of courtroom insensitivity that sent the judge into a rage, a teen murderer smiled to the point of nearly laughing while the surviving family members of his victim read their impact statements. Dante Wright was convicted of fatally shooting 18-year-old Jordan Klee during a botched robbery he committed with 2 friends in 2016. By the time Wright's day in court came around, his accomplices had already pleaded guilty to their roles in the deadly confrontation. Wright also took a plea deal, but when he cruelly grinned as Klee's relatives poured their hearts out in front of him, prosecutors gave the victim's family a chance to have the deal taken off the table. They wanted to move on from the senseless tragedy, so they gave their blessing to continue with things as planned. The judge almost decided on his own to yank the agreement, but he decided not to after learning that the family wanted to get the case over with. Klee's loved ones had also resolved to forgive Wright despite his despicable behavior. In her statement, the victim's mother said that her feelings toward the defendant were the first time she ever felt hate in her heart. She said she wished for him to feel cold, hungry, and sleepless whenever he finds himself wanting warmth, food, and a good night's sleep. But that she doesn't actually want any of that to happen because she was determined to show that she was nothing like the killer. Wright's lawyer apologized on his behalf, stating that their client suffers from emotional issues and implying that the teen laughed out of fear. His mother, Anjanette Carter, told MLive.com that she believed her son smiled due to mental health problems. She said that he dealt with everything in life by smiling. Carter believed Wright was innocent, but unfortunately his behavior in court did not reflect what most people would expect to see from an innocent man. At his sentencing hearing, Wright said that he loved his family and that he would see them soon. He failed to address the smiling incident, and he probably won't see his family anytime soon. Not outside prison walls, at least. As part of his plea deal, the convicted killer was sentenced to 25 to 52 years in prison. And he might as well get comfortable there because his earliest parole date is in 2042 and his maximum release date is in 2078. Number 9. Anjanette Welk. It's not entirely unheard of for people to smile in their mugshots, but when it happens, the suspect usually isn't facing charges that involve taking a human life. One exception is a Florida woman named Anjanette Welk, who flashed a huge grin while having her picture taken for a 2018 DUI-related crash in Ocala that left a victim dead. At the time the photo was snapped, 60-year-old Sandra Clarkston was still clinging to life. But it's probably safe to assume that the accident was bad enough for most people to understand the gravity of their actions, and that death was a realistic prospect. Welk was initially charged with DUI, causing serious bodily injury. The charge was upgraded to DUI manslaughter 4 days later, after Sandra died. Although Welk looks disturbingly overjoyed in her mugshot, her attorney Stacey Yeomans described her client as a good-hearted person, a wife, mother, and friend who is devastated by what happened. Regardless of how bad she felt at the outset of the case, the drunk driver certainly wasn't smiling during her sentencing hearing when she was hit with prison time for her crimes. Welk pleaded no contest to the DUI manslaughter charge, along with 2 counts of DUI with property damage. Footage of the hearing showed her crying in court as she was handed an 11-year sentence followed by 15 years of probation. Welk apologized to Sandra's surviving family members and said that if she could trade places with the victim, she would. She became eligible for parole after serving 4 years, but remains incarcerated with a projected release date of December 2028. Number 8. Justin J. Paul. A Michigan man named Justin James Paul went viral in December 2017 for smiling in his mugshot while his face was covered in blood. The 22-year-old was accused of fatally slicing his 50-year-old mother, Jeanette's throat, at their home in Westland. A neighbor, Cindy Hedger, discovered Jeanette's body after receiving a terrifying voicemail from the victim, who was screaming and crying in what seemed like a state of sheer terror. Hedger went over to the Paul family's home to check on Jeanette and found her injured and unresponsive on the floor. She later said she kept looking for any signs of life, but saw none as she waited for help to arrive. Jeanette was pronounced dead at the scene. Cindy Hedger's son, Nathan, said that he saw Justin fleeing the home on foot shortly before his mother went over there. He said he tried to catch up with Justin, but was unable to. The medical examiner concluded that the victim was stabbed to death. According to police, blood trail evidence at the scene suggested that Jeanette had been dragged through the house following the deadly attack. While attempting to take Justin into custody, a police officer shot him in the thigh. He fled the scene but was soon apprehended on a first-degree murder charge. In early 2019, he pleaded guilty but mentally ill to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 18 to 60 years in prison. Number 7. Cara Lois. When a British woman named Cara Lois was arrested for going on a racist tirade toward a fellow bus passenger and kicking a cop in the chest in 2022, her lawyer would claim in court that she was just getting her life on track when the incident occurred. Having been an alcoholic since age 13, the 39-year-old from Hull had a long history of crime to go along with her addiction. According to prosecutors, Lois and her boyfriend were arguing on a double-decker bus when an Asian woman asked them to quiet down. Lois allegedly swore and hurled racial insults at the woman, then grabbed her by the coat and pulled. She was also accused of challenging the victim to go outside and fight and refusing to get off the bus. Authorities claimed that Lois's behavior caused distress to multiple people. When police arrived at the scene, the defendant was taken to the hospital, where she threatened to kill an officer and acted vulgar and verbally abusive toward the people around her. It was during her visit to the emergency room that she kicked a police officer in the chest. During questioning, she denied having any memory of the incident and also insisted she wasn't racist. But her lengthy track record suggested otherwise, with at least one of her 23 prior convictions being for racially aggravated harassment. The victim said she was left feeling scared that Lois might see her again in public and harass her or hurt her. A man who had tried to intervene said that he stepped in when he saw the look on the woman's face and because he didn't think she deserved the abuse. In 2023, Lois admitted to using racially aggravated threatening words or behavior, assault and assaulting a police officer who was acting as an emergency worker. Her attorney told the court that the incident had been a wake-up call for her client, who had quit drinking and wanted to change her lifestyle. Number 6. Beyhan Mutlu. When a Turkish man named Beyhan Mutlu failed to return home and stopped answering his phone after going out drinking with friends in 2021, his family reported him missing in the city of Inegöl. The 50-year-old had wandered off into a forest and at some point crossed paths with a search party that was looking for him. Unaware that he was the subject of the search, Mutlu helped look for the missing person for several hours. It wasn't until members of the party began calling his name that he realized he was the person they were trying to find. He apparently didn't even stop to think about the fact that he had been out of touch with his loved ones for several days and that they might be worried about him. After taking a statement from Mutlu, authorities took him home to his family. A similarly bizarre incident happened in Iceland back in 2012 when a lost tourist participated in a large-scale search for herself in a remote mountainous area. She had been reported missing when she failed to return to her tour bus after the driver had waited for an hour. It was revealed that the woman had actually been on the bus and that she had helped look for herself without realizing it. She had changed her clothes and freshened up before getting on the bus, and she apparently looked so different that nobody recognized her from before. Whoever was tasked with keeping track of the passengers also apparently miscounted them. When she finally realized that she was the subject of the search, she immediately told the bus driver and the police called off the search. Number 5. Shonda Johnson Williams. 48-year-old Jamie Williams was found stabbed to death with a filleting knife inside his Choctaw County, Oklahoma home in November 2019. Authorities quickly narrowed in on his wife, 48-year-old Shonda Johnson Williams, as their prime suspect. According to a statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Oklahoma, which identifies the alleged killer as Shonda Lynette Johnson, the suspected killer denied any involvement in her husband's death. She was nevertheless charged with first-degree murder, but it appeared based on her grinning mugshot that she wasn't taking the situation seriously. Because Johnson is a member of a federally recognized Native American tribe, her case was federally prosecuted. Nearly 3 years later, in October 2022, a jury convicted Johnson of voluntary manslaughter. While it appears as though her sentence was never revealed, it's probably a safe bet that she wasn't nearly as happy about the situation as she seemed in her mugshot. Number 4. Mohammed Ashan. Back in 2012, almost a decade before the Taliban regained power over Afghanistan, a mid-level commander named Mohammed Ashan appeared at a police checkpoint holding a wanted poster with his own photo on it. He said he wanted to collect the $100 reward being offered for information leading to his capture. Ashan was wanted for allegedly plotting 2 IED attacks against Afghan security forces and American troops. One U.S. official described him as the Taliban equivalent of Home Alone burglars. U.S. Army Specialist Matthew Baker later told the Washington Post that military personnel were in disbelief when they were confronted with the situation. He said that when they asked Ashan if he was who he claimed to be, he enthusiastically said yes and asked to receive the reward. A biometric scan proved that he was telling the truth about his identity. The encounter was shocking, not only because people rarely turned themselves in, but because intelligence was rarely passed on to authorities, period, when it came to tracking down fugitives in Afghanistan. According to Washington Post correspondent Kevin Seif, officials wondered if Ashan's behavior reflected the Taliban's desperation for resources or its blatant defiance of law and order. But, as Seif put it, the consensus has landed on the singularity of Ashan's act and the intellectual calculus that led to it. Number 3. Ladarian Chandler. Polk County, Florida Sheriff Grady Judd does not hold back his feelings when he updates the public on his jurisdiction's latest arrests. In fact, he's become internet famous for his blunt and heavily sarcastic delivery of the county's crime news. He delivered one of his many highly circulated press conferences in March 2023 when he announced the arrest of a 19-year-old suspected murderer and aspiring rapper named Ladarian Chandler. The young man, who goes by the stage name Bang Bang, was accused of killing fellow gang member 33-year-old John McGee. According to investigators, gunfire broke out amid mean mugging between rival gangs that escalated into violence. McGee was reportedly trying to run away when he was shot in the back. He survived for about a month after the shooting, but he was uncooperative with law enforcement because he wanted to exact revenge on his own terms, which he wouldn't have been able to do if Chandler was locked up. But he never got a chance to do whatever he was planning on because he refused to take medicine he needed in order to recover, and he died in the hospital. Chandler was already in custody for a non-fatal shooting when he learned that he was facing a first-degree murder charge in connection to McGee's death. While it would have been helpful if McGee had implicated the suspect in the crime, authorities decided they had enough evidence to move forward with the case. In addition to accusing the suspect of bragging about the murder in one of his songs, Sheriff Judd took one hit after another at Bang Bang for essentially being a talentless bottom feeder who made terrible music. Judd claimed that the lyrics in the song talk about shooting the victim in the back as he tried to run, which the sheriff cited as an example of Chandler's cowardice. And while the lawman is not exactly a rap fan himself, he said that one of his employees listened to the song and gave it a seal of disapproval, calling it one of the worst rap tracks they had ever heard. To drive his point home, Judd played an excerpt from the song that he believed reflected evidence of McGee's dying at Chandler's hands. Judd continued ripping into the teen, describing Chandler's reaction to being arrested as similar to a baby that lost his pacifier. He took the additional liberty of mocking the suspect for posting photos of himself brandishing guns on Facebook, despite being banned from owning a gun due to his prior convictions. With a record dating back nearly half his life, Chandler was used to landing in hot water with the law, but this was his first murder charge. Even at such a young age, Chandler had already done a considerable amount of time behind bars. He was released from prison just weeks before McGee's murder. In his closing thoughts, Judd used the case as an opportunity to warn other young gangbangers who think they're cool that they could end up just like Chandler, only 19 years old and looking at a potential lifetime in prison. Number 2. Brian Sinclair. Traffic in New York is often chaotic to begin with, but things became downright terrifying for rush hour drivers on the Long Island Expressway one day in 2018 when a massive crane ran over and hit multiple vehicles. With tires as tall as a grown man and a chassis the size of 6 large pickup trucks, the 30-ton vehicle was capable of crushing regular-sized vehicles like soda cans. It became clear that something was wrong when the crane struck a Nissan Maxima, leaving the car totaled and the driver injured. Instead of stopping at the scene, the colossal vehicle continued down the highway, hitting 3 more vehicles and sending 2 more motorists to the hospital. The crane showed no signs of slowing down or stopping as it barreled along at 48 miles per hour, with Suffolk County Highway Patrol Officer Joseph Goss in pursuit. Goss later said at a news conference that the crane was weaving between lanes and the driver was completely incapable of maintaining his lane. After chasing the crane for more than 6 miles in heavy traffic, Goss and fellow officer Luis Bustamante knew that the driver was not going to stop voluntarily, and they were becoming increasingly worried that he would end up killing someone. Left with no other choice than to take drastic action, Goss waited until the crane slowed down enough for him to exit his cruiser and jump up onto the cab. With his service weapon in hand, he commanded the driver to stop, and the man finally cooperated. While most people in the driver's position would probably panic and try to explain away their behavior, 47-year-old Brian Sinclair simply said, "What's up?" as if it were an ordinary day, and he hadn't just totaled several vehicles and put dozens of lives at risk. According to court documents, his eyes were glassy and bloodshot, his speech was slurred, he was unsteady on his feet, and he stunk of booze. Sinclair was hauled off to jail on suspicion of driving while intoxicated and leaving the scene of an accident. Shortly after the arrest, Sinclair's attorney said that he planned to fully fight the charges against his client. While it's unclear how the case turned out, records show that he applied for permission to build a pole barn in the yard of his Riverhead home in 2020, which means that he wasn't in jail at the time. Hopefully the dangerousness of his alleged actions sank in at some point and reflect a closed chapter of his life. Number 1. Julianne Farrell. After losing both their parents, 25-year-old British expat Morgan Keane and his 21-year-old brother continued to look after the family home in southwestern France. While chopping wood at the isolated property in the village of Calvignac one afternoon in 2020, Keane was shot in the chest by a hunter who mistook him for a boar. He cried out for help as he drowned in his own blood, suffering for up to 15 minutes before he finally succumbed to his injuries. The shooter, 33-year-old Julianne Farrell, was passing through the area as part of an organized hunt. There was no alcohol in his system, and he was reportedly devastated that he had accidentally killed a person. But according to CBS News, he was unfamiliar with the area and was in a poorly chosen location without proper safety instructions. Authorities charged Farrell and the hunt's organizer, 51-year-old Laurent Lapergue, with involuntary manslaughter. As the criminal trial approached, Keane's friends, family and community called for stricter hunting laws. A petition for the cause gathered 120,000 signatures and prompted the government to conduct a safety review of the policies in place. Hunting is a long-standing tradition of the French countryside. Supporters say it's necessary for keeping boar and deer populations under control. But each hunting season comes with tragedies, usually in the form of hunters accidentally shooting civilians, and an increasing number of people want to see changes that will help keep people safer. It's a deeply divisive issue, with pro-hunters fighting just as hard to prevent heightened restrictions as anti-hunters are to strengthen laws. And while both sides of the matter have valid points, the lawyer representing Keane's family accused Farrell and his fellow hunters of making light of the victim's death because he was British. According to the attorney, the problems between the family and hunters in general began years before Keane's death, when his father politely asked some hunters to leave his property. Farrell was extremely apologetic in court, so it's unclear whether the lawyer's claims are merited. The jury found Farrell and Lapergue guilty of involuntary manslaughter, which meant that they could each face up to 3 years behind bars. But the court spared them both from prison time. Farrell was given a 2-year suspended sentence and banned from hunting for life, while Lapergue received an 18-month suspended sentence and was banned from hunting for 5 years. Thanks for watching. Would you rather accidentally hit the laughing emoji in reaction to a friend's post about a loved one dying, or unknowingly talk about your trivial problems like it's the end of the world in front of someone who had just experienced a seriously devastating tragedy? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.